Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for coming today to our Climate Connection series. Today we are talking about the built environment and the challenges to decarbonization around that with industry. As always, we like to start our sessions with our land acknowledgement. So I acknowledge the land on which I gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. I encourage everyone to add their personal land acknowledgements in the chat. So what is Climate Connections? Climate Connections is our series where we connect industry and their pain points with academia. The climate imperative presents enormous challenges for industries that must now align their strategy and operations with the goal of a low carbon economy. As industry steps up to meet these pressing new climate challenges, there are exciting new opportunities for the translation of research into impact. Enter Climate Connections, our problem-driven event series that connects solution seekers from industry with researchers and innovators from academia, and fosters cross-sector connections to address the climate challenge. This series brings together industry experts who present short reverse pitches on the challenges they see. Through structured conversations with academic researchers, innovators, and entrepreneurs, we unpack and explore their challenges and hope to spark ideas and connections among the audience. And so a quick walkthrough of our agenda. We're going to do our welcome and introductions really briefly, probably about 5 minutes. Then we're going to introduce our industry experts panel and let them have the floor to talk about their pain points that they're seeing. We're going to follow that with a moderated Q&A, and we're going to have a brief closing remarks at the end. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Colin Weston, who is our Director of Build Next here with Foresight Canada, to explain a little bit about Foresight and Build Next. Oh, you're on mute, Colin.
There we go. I am now unmuted. Shannon, thank you very much. Yes, I am Colin Weston. I am the Director of Foresight Canada's Build Next program, which is one of 6 Next programs that we have within Foresight. So just very quickly, an overview of Foresight if you're not familiar with us. So yes, Foresight Canada, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary as Canada's National Clean Tech Accelerator and Ecosystem Builder. And our big, ambitious, audacious goal is to help Canada become the first G7 country to reach net zero. And we do that through the programming and connectivity we have across the country, and to accelerate that transition, needing to rapidly launch, commercialize, and scale climate solutions and ventures. And we do that through the ecosystem we build with what we call our Helix 5 partners, which we have a lot of representation here today on this session here. So from innovators, industry, participants, investors, government, and academia. So we are really relentlessly driving clean tech innovation across Canada. And quickly, we do this through many ways, and the 5 key ones are through the accelerator programs, of which Foresight, with Build Next, we have our annual one, which will be launching our 2nd cohort in spring of 2024, and also innovation challenges, these problem-driven approaches to solving industry challenges, which we can talk about more if you're interested in that. And then with the capital attraction, both with private and government funding, and also with debt financing and other mechanisms that we have within our ecosystem to connect ventures in that way. And then also on the export side, because we really are international and global in scope, and also the ecosystem building piece, of which the event we're having today is just one other example of how we bring community together. And finally here, quickly about Build Next and our vision. And our goal is to ensure that 40% of Canada's building stock, both existing to retrofit and also new construction, is net zero by 2030. And big challenge, of course, because the built environment globally and in Canada contributes 1/3 of global CO2 emissions. And that broken down between the use of fossil fuels in buildings, also generation of electricity and heat in buildings, and also material manufacturing used in building construction. So that is what we are focusing on here with Build Next. And I'm excited for the talk we're going to have today and the presentations that are just going to be another example of how we're helping to make this happen. So with that, Shannon, back over to you.
Thank you, Colin. And just a quick shout out to our partners. I want to give a huge shout out to our academic partners for Climate Connections. Thank you to Entrepreneurship at UBC, Simon Fraser University, McMaster University, and the Impact Investing Hub at the University of Victoria. We are very proud of the academic partnerships we have in this event, and we have many more collaborations in promoting these events. In order to meet our climate commitments as a country, we will need new solutions, and we are very excited to be engaging with the thousands of super bright and talented researchers across these organizations to make sure they are working on the most pressing climate challenges. These institutions represent over 100,000 students and tens of millions of dollars in equipment that we need as part of our transition. I'd like to thank them for helping to make sure we have a full room today. So thanks to Entrepreneurship at UBC, Simon Fraser University, McMaster University, and the University of Victoria Impact Investing Hub. And with that, we're done with the introduction, so we can get on to the exciting part of our panel. We have Patrick Crabb, who is the director for mass timber from Bird Construction. Unfortunately, David couldn't attend today. He had a family emergency, but he is the manager for energy solutions with Modern Niagara. And we have Adrian Francese, head of digital business with Siemens. And with that, I'm actually going to pass it over to Patrick first, who's going to talk about quantifying embodied carbon and the challenges surrounding decarbonization.
Everyone, thank you for that, Shannon. Colin, I'm going to share my screen here. I have lots of slides to work through in a very short period of time, so this is the most efficient. And do we have success? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for having me here and for taking time out of your busy schedules to listen. All of the partners that were just mentioned that Shannon introduced to kind of make events like this possible, they all have mass timber projects underway. So that's quite exciting. I think McMaster has one in design, maybe not in construction, but the other partners certainly have their experience with mass timber. And this is going to be a bit of a marriage between the two. I wake up every day, kind of eat, sleeping, and breathing mass timber and its correlation to embodied carbon. So it's going to be kind of like I said, a bit of marriage between both topics. So moving forward, it's important to note that as Canadians, the way that kind of our society has evolved is that we spend very little time outside. Humans, and this has been something that has been researched all over the world, is that we have a biophilic response to nature and natural materials. We're under less stress. We have reduced heart rate. Even hospitals that have atriums and such can experience patients having faster healing times. So one of my professors at the University of British Columbia, he looked at this in the realm of what does wood grain do to humans, and specifically students in this instance? Considering we spend so much more time inside now, how about we try and bring the outdoors in through exposing wood grain and seeing how students behave? So 2 classrooms were kind of given the same layout, the same temperature, only one is kind of a vinyl material that's prevalent, and then a exposed wood grain material that in the other room. And the students had nodes on their skin to measure kind of their skin conductance response, which translates into how much stress they're under. So in the baseline condition, when they were in there and they were given a 10-minute pop quiz, and then they were monitored for a recovery period, and in every instance, the students were under less stress in the visible wood grain classroom. And this is where I went to high school. Perhaps that's why the institution tried to medicate me, and I almost failed grade 12. It's more of like a insane asylum in here. And this is where I went to university, and perhaps that's why I flourished. It truly does create healing and beautiful creative spaces that are conducive to learning, and they help the environment. So let's say that I'm talking to a bunch of different investors today, and I have a product that I would like to talk to you about. And in fact, it sequesters carbon, it generates oxygen from carbon dioxide, it's grown by the sun, it's biodegradable, extremely strong and lightweight. It's about 1/8 the weight of concrete. It's affordable and high demand. It is code acceptance all over the world. and Canada is certainly pushing those boundaries, has healing properties, and it adds about a 10 times multiplier to current commodity resources. You know, like if you have a credit card here, let's tap. It's amazing that there are these incredible benefits that can be offered through mass timber, yet they are still overlooked every day. And if you're questioning kind of the environmental impact of mass timber and its benefits, you know, you just have to kind of look at how other conventional materials from finite resources are produced when wood is just grown naturally by the sun. We're pursuing one of the tallest wood projects in the world in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. It is equivalent to a 27-story conventional tower. The structural system will be all wood, and it takes North American forests to grow that volume of wood about 1 minute. So in Canada, we have around 347 million hectares of forests. Many of these are managed and also sustainably certified through various programs like CSA, SFI, or FSC, and the annual allowance for cutting to ensure that you don't end up in a declining balance of resources and that you're allowing more time for these trees to grow. The annual allowable cut is about 0.72 million hectares, and rarely do we ever achieve that. Now, this is a close-up look at a commodity piece of 2x4 that was produced in a sawmill about 15 minutes away from me. And the way that the forest industry works is that it's all about volume. It's not necessarily about adding value to our precious resources. And often when we look at commodity lumber like a 2x4 here, even its design values are underrepresented. The lower 5 percentile of these commodity species grouping, and in this case, it's spruce, pine, and fir, the lower 5 percentile is what actually is used to design the strength values for these buildings. There's really no incentive for value. It's how efficiently can we produce these toothpicks and get them to export markets. Where if we're to think a little bit differently and put these products, take the stronger pieces of wood out of the fiber basket and put them into a mass timber product like glulam, for your columns and beams, and then cross-laminated timber, which are your panel products for floors, ceilings, and wall systems, to create the recreational spaces of today and tomorrow, and build affordable housing. This is one in Kitchener, Ontario. This is Element 5 as the mass timber producer, and this is what the product looks like on the inside. It's incredible. It doesn't look like it would be an affordable housing solution. It's a prefabricated material, so you know it goes together like IKEA. Your construction schedules are condensed considerably, and this is an example of pushing the limits. This is a 25-story mixed-use residential tower in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I would encourage you to go and watch the PBS news feature on this building. It's absolutely incredible. Lend-Lease, one of the most sophisticated developers in the world, has said that as we're trying to achieve our carbon targets, which I'll talk through in a second, is that there's potential all downtown cores in North America will have about 20% mass timber by volume. So when we talk about trying to be net zero by 2050, which is, you know, the kind of the aligned global directive, well, the government of Canada has also looked at, based on the IPCC requirements, to have the amount of emissions based on the 2018 emissions baseline. And really a lot of this comes down to how do we manage embodied carbon as we are investing so much money into greening the energy production across this country. So as Colin had mentioned, buildings from new construction, remodel, renovation, as well as operation account for about 1/3 of the CO2 emissions annually. And by Architecture 2030, a recent publication for them is that moving forward, just over the past 5 years, is that new materials and new construction, it's the embodied carbon that accounts for about 90% of the carbon emissions for the built world. So this is really the blind spot in current building incentivization and design, is embodied carbon. And I'm just going to walk through exactly what that is. And to put it into context is that we build a New York City across the world every month. And that means that that's an incredible amount of embodied carbon that is certainly emitted into the atmosphere, and we have to find ways to reduce that. So what is embodied carbon? And it really is kind of your what is the global warming potential, or the CO2 equivalent output per cubic meter of the material you're producing. So it will be tracked from resource extraction to product conversion, so a sawmill in this case, to transportation to site. That's essentially what embodied carbon is. And as our buildings are being designed to be more efficient, and our grid structures are, removing things like coal-generated energy and more into renewables, it really is going to have a lesser impact, the operational impact of carbon emissions, and the embodied carbon certainly becomes a larger piece of that pie. This is a project that Bird Construction is working on with Intuitive in partnership with the University of Toronto. And Intuitive has designed different 12-story towers, office towers, one of just cast-in-place concrete, one of a hybrid solution, so concrete and mass timber, and then one as an all-mass timber solution. And these have been designed to be accommodated in all the major city centers across Canada to investigate what is the differential in embodied carbon between these materials. And here is a sneak peek, is that, the hybrid solution, even with concrete cores and concrete foundation and a wood superstructure, you're looking at about a 63% reduction in embodied carbon, which is expressed in this case as CO2 equivalent per meter squared. So that's substantial. And when we look at the building accreditation systems here in North America and across the world, how do they actually measure or capture decisions made around embodied carbon? Well, they don't. It's simply the blind spot, as I had mentioned, and really it's only focused on operational efficiency. And Kelly Alvarez, who is also part of this study at the University of Toronto, from Have Studios, he does an incredible presentation on the Carbon Leadership Forum website about him designing a net zero cottage in Haliburton, Ontario. And everyone would think, well, net zero, that's the smartest way to do it. But if you step back and you break out the materials that were specified to achieve this net zero, it was anything but helpful for the environment. So, we can think that a net zero solution is the right solution, but carbon is a universal currency. We have to look at the whole picture and account for what are the materials that are being specified in this building. And this is a bit of a myth busting. But, when you look at some of the green design requirements that are promoted to achieve LEED building standards, in some cases, they can actually be more detrimental than what they achieve. Like, for instance, green roofs. Depending on the structural system of the building, you're going to need massive structural reinforcement, adding embodied carbon to that structure. There's many polychemicals in some of the linings that go into these roof membrane systems to ensure that moisture doesn't leak into the structure. And, through the life cycle of that project, the green roof and energy savings may not be as high as all the other, the cost of the environment to actually implement that in the first place. When we look at urban design practice and design guidelines, step backs in buildings, yes, from an observer at a street level, buildings can be less intimidating, but they're incredibly inefficient from a density perspective and a structural design perspective. So, all of these things have to be taken into consideration. Now, this was a very quick life cycle analysis of a project that I can't really mention, but it is a hospital, and doing the baseline embodied carbon calculation, you can see where all the carbon is. It's in the foundation and in the upper floor construction. This one building itself will have the equivalent emissions of around 11,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. To put that into perspective, Bird Construction just did our baseline CO2 calculation for 2022, and we're about 30,000. You know, we're a company of 5,000 people. We do over 5 billion in revenue across many different sectors. And our annual emissions are just about 3 times that one building. So how do we track this? Well, it's important that we promote and we inform industry about something that's called an environmental product declaration, an EPD. And these are preferred to be third party generated by, you know, the Underwriters Laboratory of Canada, ULC, and they can be manufacturer based, but then they don't really hold as much merit. But essentially EPDs are that nutrition label of your product that really define what is that global warming potential. And then you can use that as you're developing your estimate for a building and you're looking at different structural systems so that you have, you know, your line item of costs next to what is the global warming impact so that you can start to make more informed decisions. Yes, this is and can be a pretty frustrating part of my career is to have people start thinking this way and actually adopting this, but there have been some wins. The city of Vancouver has implemented embodied carbon regulation, and in May of 2023, the city of Toronto has, thanks to a lot of the great work that's done by the Canadian Wood Council and Woodworks groups and Forest Products Association of Canada and the other forestry agencies. And they recently delivered an affordable housing package of 2 projects in the city of Toronto, and this only applies to city-owned assets. And the embodied carbon regulation came into play. The buildings had to be within 350 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. So that's really incredible to see, and I commend the city of Toronto and city of Vancouver for being innovative and pushing the boundaries. So thanks everyone for your time and attention. And at the conclusion of this panel, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That was great. I know I wrote a bunch of notes myself, so thank you so much for your insights on that. I'm just going to reshare my screen here. Perfect. So next up we have Adrian Francese, who is the head of digital business with Siemens, and he's here to talk about challenges facing commercial buildings and the road to decarbonization. Adrian.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, everybody here. Patrick, that was phenomenal. It's a lot of information, and we see all the engagement from the construction there, which is going to be very much aligned with this. Buildings, we have a real opportunity, and the most, it's actually a mandatory responsibility to make our buildings, our current buildings, more efficient. So this is a very interesting industry where it was hit hard, not only by the pandemic, but also sustainability concerns. So what we're going to share is some statistics and also some of the challenges which we all, as part of the industry and innovation, part of coming up with new solutions, we need to address. So when you look at the commercial buildings, there are 3 main areas that are actually being severely impacted with in this industry. There's areas of from the people standpoint, the way that people uses the building, the challenges as well as it's going to be very different. You see some vacancy rates. You see people after, particularly post-pandemic, behaving differently on how they're going to use the space. So it's expected that at least 30% of the real estate space is going to be completely flexible in terms of usage. From the business standpoint, it's interesting because they have multiple challenges in terms of how is the building efficiencies in sustainability and user experience relationship will affect their productivity in their own people and also attracting tenants and keeping the buildings efficient. 80% of the total life cycle cost of the buildings are in the operations phase. So we have to think about these things. So thank you, Shannon, for moving into that one. 75% of buildings are sitting in the inefficient energy arena, and I'll talk about that later. So when you go in a little bit more depth, you see some statistics here because this is on top of what I was talking about. So it's it's a market where sustainability is huge in the agenda, in everybody's concern, in their executive boards of directors of these massive deployments, and also from the user standpoint and the reality of the data. But also think about these topics where they are also addressing, coming into this industry, right? So everything has to be flexible. We will not have enough people. I think that it's a potential concern in many industries across industry. But we have all this pressure. We need to get to the CO2 emissions reductions and targets, but at the same time, we have a lot more costs affecting that industry and a different concern. So if you move to the next slide, there are two big areas here, and this is something. There's some things that are happening there. Smart hospital is an example, but what you have is two parts of the building. So Patrick covered the construction and how that influences and embodied carbon. So that's one sphere that we see from the construction standpoint. All the design that needs to be brought into the smart building arena to make them competitive, predictable, but also is the whole experience and how the actual building is used, that it makes a significant impact. And I'm going to use an examples on that case because it's so broad, right? So we could be talking about hours in terms of different challenges in the building uses. But the key is to bring these two things together: construction, operations, day-to-day. The operations is 80% of the cost. So we have to be very careful on how we draft that. And every single stage of the way has a significant impact in overall carbon footprint and future sustainability targets. So if you go to the next one, you will see that when we combine these two groups together, we bring in this holistic approach. There are significant impacts and positive impacts, obviously, that are at hand. Put it that way. There's a path to reach them in different business aspects in this industry. So operational costs, we all know, well, if you run the building more efficient, there's definitely a savings that you can see on a monthly bill basis. In that is very tangible. But how about the decarbonization, right? So it's when we bring this holistic approach and how these things are designed and interconnected and working together toward the end, those goals are tangible, are coming in. So this industry, this is a really big impact in their business. The one that is very interesting to me, it's also there is a strong relationship between in how we bring people to the buildings, because that affects how they use the buildings, and how they use the buildings affects how much is it going to cost them to keep them alive, or even real estate, rental and leasing costs. So there is a connection that is coming alive a lot more stronger than ever before, and it's a challenge that the industry overall is trying to get our head around it. So from the technology standpoint, if you go to the next slide, it's how we can make this happen. So there's a big part of the construction materials. There's a big part on how we design, how will we bring it together. And when you see there's a journey, right? So I'm leading the digital business. It's all about leveraging those digital technologies to understand our buildings better and actually do something about that information and leave the path for higher efficiencies, right? In changing and transforming processes. So if you see the traditional building, an automated building, a journey, that let's focus on just for 1 second on that piece. I've been in this industry for 30 years, and I have put my hands on the traditional building and automated buildings, and now I'm putting my hands in how we're driving toward autonomous building. But if you ask me, okay, where do we see today? So new construction being, heavily, we have the opportunity with the new buildings, obviously, to make the best out of it, to make them carbon efficient and all that. But how about all the massive building base that we have with 50 years old, outdated systems, inefficient energy, mechanical systems, so on and so forth. That's where most of the buildings sit in. It's about 70 to 75% of the current buildings are still dwindling in the traditional and automated building arena. Now we are, rapidly moving into the smart building, which we've been talking about for many, many years, but now the technology is in a better position to finally enable us to do that holistic analytics. We were gathering a lot of information that the building has not been used, like from the automated building to the smart building. We were already collecting data. Now we're figuring out a way to actually make models, run analytics to it, collect the data, bringing them together. And we are in our way to our autonomous building, which would be fully automated experience, the building learning with the current technologies, as well as analytics from the software side, how to be more efficient, anticipate to problems, and et cetera, et cetera. But we have a long ways to go. So how this comes together? So if you go to the next slide, it's this is where we're sitting, and this is probably very interesting for some of the audience here from Innovator. Okay, we have a lot of data. The data comes in different shapes and form from different systems. The traditional thinking of the building, I have my building automation system and that's it. But then you need additional information to understand how the building is used. The automation system on its own is not going to give you that. So we have to think about how the building needs to be used and what is the real impact in our energy efficiencies, particularly to impact the carbon footprint. So essentially simple. You got 3 layers. You need, obviously, we live in physical buildings, even though we work in digital twins, but we can understand that, but we actually go into physical. You need a physical data collected. IoT devices is one of the areas that is exploding. There's so many options out there, and people keep improving and coming up with brilliant ideas on how to collect more data. Now that data has to go somewhere, and you have some on-premise or within the building, a collection of that data, but it's really going to the cloud. And we are in that transformation too. So you bring the information to the cloud, and now with software, you can apply all kinds of analytics and machine learning rules and all these new technologies that further analysis, compare it to models. Now you have all this data, you can build your digital twin, you can anticipate how your building is going to react, what are the true areas of efficiencies. So now, the one thing that is very important, nobody can do this alone. And we all know this in the industry. So this is an industry effort. And when we bring together, there's no one technology company that can do absolutely 100% of what the building needs in order to move the needle towards the decarbonization targets. So that's what we need, partners. So we need an ecosystem of technology providers and manufacturers to make this happen, to make it real in a building. So that's a snapshot from the technology standpoint, how these things come to life. But once you analyze the data, and we are in a portion where you can see so many applications out there that are focused on a specific asset type of equipment, etc. They can analyze it to death, and you have a lot of information. So of opportunities to improvement. But now we are facing that pace of also, okay, I don't even know where to start. My building I had to do so many things in my building, so I need help to make things happen. So that's a different discussion for another time, but it's that's how the industry is evolving into that, and how we're trying to get those targets. But it's real. There are use cases that we can see how simple things that can be implemented today make a 10%, 10 to 15% efficiencies in energy, how they manage that information and how they use it. So it's very tangible. So we can really move the needle here. So let's go to the next one, because it's an example. So I mentioned something. I wanted to bring it up because it's recent. It's post-pandemic. It's a little bit outside the traditional thinking of how the building solutions or how my building is automated. We all know that, and most of us are working, in a hybrid mode or flexible. I'm in my house right now, so yeah, I think everybody, it's in that situation. But from a real estate standpoint, it poses a concern. Okay, how do we use our building? If we use our places more efficiently, then we might need less footprint. Therefore, we can rearrange those existing buildings that are in downtown and probably host more people, reducing some of additional portfolio footprint that could impact the environment. So from that perspective, we've been working with a lot of our customers in terms of what does it take. Number one, I don't know how my building is used. I don't know how my space is used. I know we're calling people to come back to the office. I don't know if they're coming in. We have access control systems, but I don't know what's happening in the floor on the other side. I don't know which areas are available, are used properly. For that, obviously, there is IoT technologies that help us understanding how the space is used. There's some examples there you can see with traffic flows and heat maps that it is fundamental for the analytics on the use of the space, but also to make proper decisions in terms of reducing space or increase the efficiencies of the energy usage. When you tie that to automated and analytics on the lighting controls and tie that to the user experience overall, the tenant experience, adjusting the actual comfort levels to their preferences and to the use of the floor. So when you start looking at this comprehensive arena, there is a significant impact in energy efficiencies, which ultimately impact the carbon footprint. So driving those analytics and understanding how people uses the building and how they react. There's one of the stories which actually opened up my eyes. It was towards the end of the pandemic. Everybody was kind of, okay, I'm sick and tired. I need to go back to the office. All right, so I want to see people back again, and people start coming back to the office, and we start looking at the designs of the offices differently. Many of us went to an open space to drive collaboration pre-pandemic. When we came back, it's like too noisy now. I don't know if I can work and be productive there. We've seen behavioral changes there that are impacting that way. So there's an opportunity because we're not done there. There's a lot of opportunities here to fully understand how that behavior flows and go from there. So when people started coming back and say, well, I'm probably more productive in my house, so went back to their houses, and companies are saying, hey, we need to collaborate. We're losing that human connection. So we need to bring you back because of team collaboration. And this is one of the use cases. The teams are starting to coming back to the offices. They don't have enough space to host all the teams at the same time because sometimes it's okay. I wanna bring my 20 people here so we can drive that conversation. We can actually interconnect, collaborate face to face, which is very needed for all of us. And all of a sudden, there's not enough room for everybody. Why there's not enough room? Well, they were not using their actual rooms booked properly. So technology is now playing a good piece of that. Are there 2 people sitting in a 16 people seating room? So that's inefficient, and the other way around. So how do we collaborate and bring all this together? This is a huge opportunity for technology. There are many applications that are looking at this, but it will continuously to be an area of opportunity because human behavior changes. That's what I meant. We wanted to go back to the office, then we realized that probably we don't have enough. But if we use this space efficiently, we will make a dent. We will actually make those buildings energy efficient and more sustainable in the future. So I think that's probably it for now, Shannon. This is a massive topic, is a huge topic, and so many use cases where the buildings can move the needle. So I'm open to connect anytime and discuss further.
Thank you so much, Adrian. That was great. I also wrote a bunch of notes during your session. I think this session is actually just for me to learn things. So it's been great so far. With that, we're going to move over to our moderated Q&A panel. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. For our audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will be happy to ask them to our panelists here. My screens are not behaving. There we go. Okay. So probably a question directed at Patrick. Do you think that accurately measuring the embodied carbon in buildings will spur more challenges or solutions?
I really do feel that the perception is that there will be increased costs associated with this, where I would almost argue the opposite. I feel it's an opportunity for individuals to learn what is being produced around them, go and talk to local building manufacturers, develop more intelligent ways of supply chains opposed to blindly specifying, products made in other countries. I really do think it's an opportunity. Yeah, I guess I would just end it with that.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Do you have anything to add to that, Adrian, or?
Very well covered. No, thank you.
Okay. Great. Just kind of a general question. Do you think both of these challenges are applicable the same across the board, across the country, or are there differences between like a Vancouver and a Halifax?
From my experience, there are substantial differences depending on even the industry in certain provinces that can kind of drive some of the political motivations, and also how big are their administrations, what are their annual revenues, and so on, to be able to have the capacity to kind of take on these special initiatives and push jurisdictions into the future. So yes, unfortunately, there is quite a bit of a difference from province to province.
From the building standpoint, I think it's a global challenge, and you can see similar challenges across different cities in Canada and across the globe. But definitely there are different requirements, right, based on how they use their space or conglomerate. Some cities are more focused on residential, some are more corporate buildings, others are. So you have a variety of demand, but the challenges are all facing the same challenges. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna jump to a question from the chat here. So given the large number of people who continue to work from home, is it a good idea to examine and understand how this could affect the carbon emissions from the built environment? Maybe I'll give that over to Adrian.
So if it's a good idea, could you repeat the question? If it's a good idea to capture the environment?
To understand the carbon emissions from the built environment, given that a large number of people who are working from home or hybrid.
Yeah, it is a great idea. I think we are all the technologies driving to understand what that impact really is and how we can approach it. How can we tackle it? The opportunities are really big, and yes, we are all working from home, but is that a sustainable model? In some working environments and some working industries, there's the right answer. I don't know if there is one, but it's probably hybrid, and we're all trying to figure that out. So it's heavily, we do need to understand that, and the buildings is our biggest opportunity to actually make the impact. That's where all the decisions were based on cost driven sometimes at the construction phase. That doesn't mean that is the more energy efficient solution, and we are living with that now 40 years later, right, and 30 years later, and I know there's a strong conscience on the new construction. There's a lot of good avenues to contain that, but we definitely need to focus on the buildings that are up and running now.
Right.
I think I can add to that too. I really do feel that the commute is an extreme waste of human potential and capital. So yeah, I think that hybrid can really help depending on where you are. And yes, it is about finding that balance. And when we looked at, you know, some of the lockdowns with COVID, that was when across the world there was the best air quality, you know, measured in, I think it was like 30 years or something like that. So it can play a role in kind of that global scope for sure.
Yeah, I think it's also very industry dependent as well. I used to, in my former life, I also managed construction projects, and you can't do a lot of that from home. You need to be on the ground seeing everything. So, but in this role, we're 100% remote. And so our organization is built that way to be 100% remote, which I think is also really important.
And another thing to add, which is somewhat similar, is, you know, when we look at zoning in a lot of city centers and so on, how there's like commercial zones separate from, you know, residential or industrial, where that really promotes people that they have to get in their car and drive to work. Like when you know, tour different countries across Europe, you know, like industry is almost the center of the town, and people can take a bike to work, and then they're recovering heat from that industrial process to, you know, generate back to the community to reduce the cost of living. I really feel it's time to break down those barriers and kind of, yeah, break down the silos and have that live, work, play mentality.
Great, thank you, Patrick. That kind of leads into another question that we have about easy or low-hanging fruit policy changes that could help innovation advance to solve some of your pain points here. Are there any other examples you can think of? Maybe.
Number one, I feel one of the greatest challenges with new things, kind of in this built environment, is procurement. And, you know, yes, as much as I'm passionate about mass timber and embodied carbon and, you know, trying to make the right choices, it's the greatest barrier is there isn't a lot of different companies out there that are doing innovative things. So a lot of the time you have to involve these companies quite early in a process through procurement. And on owners' behalf, they're like, whoa, we didn't go through a competitive procurement process. You know, we're not going to be cost competitive here. So you know, what is that balance between early onboarding these innovative companies and having that trust that having them involved early will help with cost certainty and cost control, opposed to designing something and putting it out to tender. So I really think that there needs to be a lot more work done on how we can support innovative solutions when there isn't necessarily a large bid pool of that.
Thank you. Adrian, do you have any other policy examples that you can point to?
So there are more than policies, could be you know, innovation incentives in terms of solving a real life problem. I know that we have some of those grants or programs available to incentivize technology being piloted, technology being applied. We're all learning. As I said, as an industry, we have a solution probably in the lab, but when you apply it into a building, you actually have to see if it's working or not. So there's a lot of that happening as well, that we are targeting from the company standpoint and from the industry standpoint. But I think it's a mindset. I think you know, the way I see it, my personal opinion, sustainability is it's must that needs to be addressed, and we have to remove the in some way from the government standpoint, from the private standpoint, the profit only and cost only conversation will change in the near future. There, particularly when you're looking at existing buildings, like we were talking before. There's some of them need to pretty much have a deep retrofit done with them, and sometimes the return on investment is not there. Not 2 years, not 3 years, right? Maybe it's 15 years. Who's going to live with that? So now I think as overall we are turning more into sustainability is a must. It's a cost of doing business. We have to do it, because sustainability. If you have a sustainable building, it will actually impact your business, or you know, the building's owner's business in a positive way. So I think it's a mindset more, and it has to be a going along with some policies. But it's I think there's a lot to come. It has to be a lot more coming for sure.
Great, thank
in
you.
that arena. Yeah.
I'm gonna hop to another audience question. So from Adil, question for Patrick: how do mass timber buildings perform versus concrete buildings in terms of sound barriers between floors and offices, etc.?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's two ways to answer this, is that you have STC, or sound transmission control, which is like making the sound in a room and how it will move through a wall system or go under where the wall meets the floor and so on. And then there's impact isolation. So if you're in a concrete building, let's say, and someone moves their chair at the kitchen table, do you hear that below? So what I would say is, there is no silver bullet, and that often it depends on the assembly of materials that you're using that determine your STC or IIC rating. Often you don't have solid wood walls or solid concrete walls or solid steel walls. There's detailing around that as how you're using air brakes and insulation and gypsum to achieve your STC. But I will say, from an impact isolation, the wood's ultrastructure is little cells that have air spaces between them. So compared to a solid slab of concrete, there is much more refraction of sound that will happen naturally through a CLT panel. So on its own, it does perform better than concrete from an impact isolation standpoint.
Amazing, thank you, Patrick. I think this one's for Adrian, and I think it's around the manpower for building operations. So given current issues with manpower, how can these systems reduce manpower requirements, and does this workforce need to be educated further?
A great question, because number one, the technology and all the data that we are collecting will help the people we currently have been a lot more efficient in their decisions. They can essentially get more done with their time than currently in the traditional way of operation. So one way is applying that knowledge to the data that's being collected for many years. And we, as a company, I can use our example. We learn how the buildings operate for many years, so we can apply modeling to that information and anticipate what happens. That report, that analytics, it's shared with the people that you might have in your group, so they can actually be very efficient with their time, prioritize specifically what needs to be done, so the productivity increases. Now the other question is the skill sets. Yes, the skill sets are going to push us all our organizations and industry to be more in depth, to understand some of the newer technologies coming in. There's training being provided, but it will require some real learning from all of us. I'm real learning. I'm driving digital business. I've been in the traditional building for many years. It takes time. I think the whole world needs to update. So bottom line, there will be new skills. Yes. Is it a big barrier? I don't think so. When you bring your new people, or your workforce, it starts to growing. When you have people retiring from 30 years, that transfer knowledge, it's a big barrier for many people, and could cost a lot of time. Relearning what the building is all about. The technology will enhance that. So the adaptation for new people into the new technology, understanding where things are in your building, will help your productivity. That way, you can efficiently use the manpower you have. And it is very generic, but there are different areas. It all depends on where the shortage of skills are in your organization. There are different technologies that will support you in that way. But it's quite palpable, and I think it's going to be very helpful for the entire industry.
Amazing, thank you, Adrian. We have like 1 or 2 minutes, and I really want to get to this question. So if we can do like a really brief response here. So question for both Adrian and Patrick. Do you have any previous success stories of working with different academic institutions? Sorry, I just moved on me. Or on like pilots or collaborative partnerships?
Go ahead, Adrian.
Well, we do have, from a technology standpoint, existing partnerships with entities, university entities, on how apply the technology or coming up with new ideas on how to. So we have different programs within, as an example, from Siemens perspective, that we engage in academics. And this is also related to the previous question, because we need to empower the universities and the trade schools to build that knowledge on the new technology. So we have current partnerships going on with different universities. Some are in current conversations with UBC to expand that collaboration. We have universities in Ontario that we are in depth in collaboration, and colleges as well from that angle. So it's, go ahead, Patrick.
I would just say quickly, like we are just starting to really see the value in this at Bird. Yes, we have done special projects in the past, but I think it is going to be more of a commitment corporately moving forward. Number one, to kind of bring that third-party credibility to the innovation, to either drive regulation or convince clients otherwise of, you know, how this system is better, either from an environmental standpoint or structural efficiency. Yeah, it's an incredible opportunity, and to know that there's so many great programs out there to help match these dollars to have the industry contributions go further. So we're excited to see what the future brings.
Amazing. Thank you, Adrian and Patrick. I'm just going to wrap up quickly here. So thank you everyone for attending. And again, thank you to our panelists today for their incredible insights into the industry, really digging deep and talking about their pain points here that they're facing every day and looking for solutions to solve. So our next session on climate connections is February 22nd, and this is focused on the power sector. So looking at decentralized power generation, things around that. It'll be from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific time. And we don't have a link up yet because it is a little bit far in the future. So look in the new year for that link. And thank you so much for attending our session today. We are really grateful for that, and really grateful for our partners who help us put on these great events. And thank you again to Adrian and Patrick.